You are fine. I'd like to bring this meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation Technical Coordinating Committee. My name is Matt Nier with the City of Jeffersontown. Andy, if you could do the roll call.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for joining us today. Let's start top of the list with Bullock County.
I don't see the judge in here. I thought he might come on.
Maybe we'll join us in a minute. Thanks for joining us, Keith. City of Charlestown. City of J-Town.
Here.
City of Jeffersonville. City of Mount Washington. Thanks for joining us, man. City of New Albany. See anybody yet? They may join us shortly. How about Shepherdsville? St. Matthews.
Keenan.
Thank you. Clark County. Floyd County. PennDOT.
I'm here and I believe Taylor's here.
Yes, I am.
Taylor, hey, Robin. AYTC. Hey, Tom. Tom's in the room. Anybody else online? I think I saw somebody. Who did I see?
Tracy Lovell, District 5 Project Development.
Hi, Tracy. Get this here. Who do we have from Louisville Metro APCD? I see Michelle.
Hello.
Craig Butler's here. Hi.
We can even hear Michelle. Couldn't hear Michelle on a meeting earlier this morning. Good to hear
Yeah,
you.
went back to the homestead here in the
There you go.
office.
True. Greg, thanks for joining us as well. Who else do we have from Louisville Metro government? Seeing none yet. See Kathy McAuliffe out there. Thanks for joining us, Kathy, from MDOT.
Glad to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. Let's see, Regional Airport Authority. Don't think so. How about Louisville Riverport Authority? Miguel's here.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you as well. Oldham County.
Jim Urban.
Hi, Jim.
Jim Sullivan's here too. He's
Just
There we go.
muted.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Jim U. Hi, Jim S. Anybody from the Port of Indiana? I think so. Cedro Delgado is here from KYTC. Thanks for joining us, Cedro. TARC Accessibility Advisory Council is Allie here. I don't think I saw her. Town of Clarksville.
Yeah, Mike Huff's here.
Hi, Mike. And TARC.
Aida,
Hi, Ada. Thank you for joining us.
that's your producer.
And do we have any of our advisory members here? I think Tanya's here. Hi, Tanya.
Good morning or afternoon, I should say.
For Highways. And I think I see Larry Summers joining us from New Albany. So Larry, if you can hear us, thank you for joining us. And
I can hear you.
Thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Munoz.
Thank you, Andy. Next item on the agenda is the June 2023 meeting minutes. Everyone should have received them in the packets. I asked if there is any corrections. If there's not, I'll entertain a motion for passage. There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. There's a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Transportation Policy Committee report. Andy.
Thank you, sir. When this agenda went out, the agenda was proper to say that it was, we're going to review the activities of the June 2023 TPC meeting, and I'm about to do that. But we also had a special July TPC meeting just yesterday morning, so I'll go over that here in a moment. At our June TPC meeting, pretty similar to TTCC last month for those that were here. We had what got passed was Amendment 2 to the new TIP and MTP. We awarded TPC took the TTCC's recommendation to award J-Town and Louisville Metro with the PL funded studies, the Metropolitan Planning dollars that we passed through to, we're going to pass through to J-Town and Louisville Metro this year. We also had a long discussion about our dedicated funding that comes to us from Indiana. in Indiana through NDOT. And at that meeting, what was approved was the $2.9 million that was flexed to TARP. That was the money that was at risk of being lost at the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. And so that was a bit of an urgent move that needed to be made. And so the TPC did indeed approve that last month. Chris talked a little bit about the urban boundary, just like she did at the PTCC last month, I believe. And so that's the highlights of the June meeting. Yesterday's meeting, why did we have a meeting yesterday? Some of you all were there. Some of you all maybe heard about it. Last week, we got notice from KYTC, Office of Program Management, about a federal accounting discrepancy. In other words, there's a discrepancy between two federal accounting systems, and at that time, it was thought to be a multi-billion-dollar discrepancy. More on that in agenda item 8. But what was approved yesterday, we'll stick to that, was a cost increase. I'll get into some of the details later, but the cost increase for a particular project in Oldham County that KYTC is administering through the LPA program. And so that was approved just yesterday. I will get a little bit more into the details about the funding discrepancy, the federal accounting discrepancy here, like I said, in agenda item 8. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Andy. Is there any questions for Andy? Okay, now move on. Next item is the public comment period. Barry?
Yes, we did not receive any public comments prior to the meeting. Don't see anything in the Q&A at this point either. So that, I do have hand raised. All right. Ryan, I will allow you to talk since you have your hand raised.
Hi, I'm just a citizen. I live on Pope Street in Clifton and Louisville. And it gets a lot of traffic that should be on Melwood Avenue. And I've been pushing to have Melwood made two-way. Y'all are probably familiar with the upcoming conversion on Melwood Avenue in conjunction with restripe or repaving. I'm told that there's just no way to extend that to Spring Street, the two-way conversion. I just would like you all to consider it somehow. I don't know how to push to have that done.
Can you restate the spot that you're particularly concerned about, please?
The two-way conversion is going to extend Melwood up to Frankfurt Avenue. But Kevin Bailey from the States, who I've been talking to, he says there's no way to extend it through the 64 interchange to Spring Street to allow traffic to use Spring Street to get between Frankfurt Avenue, basically, and Lexington Road. So what happens is all the traffic, because of the train underpass on Pope Street, most of the traffic between Clifton and the Highlands goes through Pope Street, which is too narrow for cars to pass without having to pull over. It's crazy traffic. It's dangerous. There's been 3 wrecks just in the last couple of weeks. Just wondering how to get a waiver or something to allow two-way traffic through that interchange, maybe with some sort of like Jersey barriers at the bottom of the on-ramp. Kevin says they can't do anything because of they don't want traffic backing up on the off-ramp onto 64 West there. Can you picture that? So it seems like it'd be something similar maybe to St. Catherine from 65 South, where they've got some blockade at the bottom. He says it's impossible. I don't I don't believe it's impossible. I'm just wondering how to petition the federal government for something like that. I don't know if my camera's on or not, but
Well, we've got a record of this comment now, and we will pass along to the appropriate agencies, many of which are in the room or in the virtual room. So they're hearing it as well. So we will appreciate the comment. Unless there's something else that the community wants to say about it, I'm happy to.
Brian, can you make sure in the chat that you put your name and phone number or email or something where we can be able to?
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
Love to. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other public comments?
I don't believe so. I think that was the only one.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Next item on the agenda is the Floyd County Transit Study. Andy and Sean.
Yes, so today we have a distinguished guest speaker, and he's a familiar face to many people in the room. Mr. Sean Dykes from the Lockmuller Group is going to discuss with and show this community, this committee, some of the recent work that his firm did in Floyd County, particularly related to some transit efforts over there. So for those that don't recall, this study was funded, more or less this time last year, last spring of 22, or early calendar 22. This was a study that came out of, as I recall, the use it or lose it money in Indiana, the kind of the conversation we had last month. This is an example of some of what we did last year with some of the money. So, Sean, over to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Andy. Glad to be here with you all. Greg, if you could pull up my slides, please.
Absolutely. Just a second.
Good deal. Thank you all. So I'm going to briefly talk to you about the study that we completed. We were done last month. And Greg, next one, please. So what I'm going to cover is project overview and what the goals of the study were. I'll spend a little bit time talking about our stakeholder engagement. We had various activities to engage stakeholders. I'll detail the existing service conditions and the demand. There is transit in Floyd County now, and I'll talk a little bit about demand and how we measure demand, and then what those different demand parameters tell us about the types of service. I'll talk about the service concepts that we examined, our recommendations, and I'll spend some time too talking about implementation and next steps, and then I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you all may have. Next slide. So in terms of project overview, as Andy said, it was led by my firm, Lockmuller. We also had on our team Nelson Nygaard, Taylor, Seifert, and Williams, and then VIA. We spent more or less about a year doing it. Our goal was to be data-driven and market-driven, but stakeholder-informed. So let the data and the market tell us what best fits Floyd County, and then tailor that solution for Floyd County. So although my colleagues in micro-mobility, we've got experience in other parts of the country, especially in rural areas, we didn't do something that's cut and paste. Instead, we wanted to focus on what the service context is in Floyd County in this region, provide a solution that is actually implementable and something that's actually sustainable, that it's going to work tomorrow, it's going to work 5 years from now, and it's something people can support and believe in, and more importantly, pay for as we go forward. Next slide, Greg. In terms of project goals, it was countywide, and it was designed to improve transit and the multimodal opportunities in Floyd County, to try to improve them beyond what exists today. As I said, we wanted to examine the data-driven market needs for transit, assess the types of services that are most feasible and make sense, and then develop a plan for sustainably delivering that service, cost the best options, and then give a roadmap. Well, how do you make this work? Because if your study just lies on a shelf, really, it's pretty worthless, and I didn't want to do that. Next slide. Stakeholder engagement was key. We had 5 key stakeholder interviews, and Mr. Summers of New Albany was one of the folks that we talked to. In addition to the school system, some people in the public social service sector, as well as people who help with workforce development, as well as education. We had 2 public events that we did to go out to the community. One was a sidewalk intercept. We spent some time camped out for a day at the JC food store there in Floyd's Knobs on the 3rd of December of last year. We told people about an opportunity to participate in our online stakeholder survey. And in exchange for that, they were entered into a drawing to win a gas card that was good at either JC or Kroger. And we've got 81 responses back from that survey. Overwhelmingly, the respondents were from Floyd County, so they had a vested stake in actually seeing something done. Our second public event was a hybrid open house and online survey. We had a couple hours spent at the Floyd County Government Center on the 30th of March of this year. And in addition to that, we had a second follow-up survey where we got 112 responses. So all told, between the 2 public events, we had some face-to-face engagement, but more importantly, we had over 200 respondents to a survey of 5 to 7 questions apiece that gave us valuable insights into what types of public transit people thought they would want, where destinations, where they would need to go, how many days a week would they use it, as well as some pricing parameters. And then it gave us some valuable demographic information as well out of that. In addition, we had a stakeholder advisory group, and we had 2 meetings of that group, as you can see there. We met with them on the 27th of January and then again on the 23rd of March of this year. So we had a fairly robust stakeholder engagement process, specifically targeted towards folks that we wanted to talk to about what their needs and issues and their desires and their goals were for transit in Floyd County. Next slide, please, Greg. As I said, there is existing service in Floyd County. TARC has Route 71, which is a fixed route. It operates along Grant Line Road, State Street, and then connects downtown New Albany back over the river to Louisville, and it also connects Clark County. It's that darker one there over in Floyd County, and then as you can see, it goes into downtown and then goes back across the river into Clark County. There is also paratransit. That's the ADA compatible component. Whenever you have fixed route service, you provide the ADA component of that, the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's for folks who can't ride the regular fixed route bus, and that's provided around a 3/4 mile buffer of that fixed service. On this route, there were 317,000 passengers, and that number was taken back from 2021. Next slide. There's an existing countywide on-demand system now run by Southern Indiana Transit System, or SITS. They are a subsidiary of a social service agency. They operate not only in Floyd County, but in Crawford, Harrison, Scott, and Washington County. They started in earnest providing services to Floyd County in January of 2022. So they've got a year of service under their belts. It's a smaller service than TARC. TARC is providing 317,000 annual trips. This service is providing 18,000 annual trips to all of those counties, and that was a 2021 number. Next slide, Greg. There's a second social service type provider over in Floyd County called Lifespan, and they provide their Rides to Go service. It offers general public demand response service in 3 counties, Clark, Floyd, Clark, Floyd, Harrison, and Scott counties. They don't have really any type of barrier to use that service, although typically their clientele is a little bit older and needs medical transport. And in 2022, they transported 23,000 passengers in all of those counties. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of existing service between all 3 of the providers in Floyd County. Next slide. How do we measure, though, transit demand? And really, there's three kind of components that we look at. We look at where people live and work, measured by population density and employment density. There in the middle, we also look at various demographic or socio-demographic traits of individuals and people who are low income, minority. They live in a household that doesn't have a car. They have low or no English speaking ability. They're self-identified as disabled, or they're older, or they're college age. And if they fall into one or more of these categories, they tend to need transit. We also, in the third component of this, we look at individual employment sites, points of interest, schools, shopping malls, social service agencies, courthouses, and activity and employment centers. And when we plot all this out on a map, we can get a good idea of how much transit demand is in a particular location. Next slide. So when we look at density of people and jobs in Floyd County, I think it comes as no surprise to many of you who are familiar with the region, is that downtown New Albany, the State Street specifically and the Spring Street corridors have the most density. And you could see that on the map where you have the darker shades of the pinkish colors there. There's also a great density around Indiana IUS, Indiana University Southeast, and then between Grant Line Road and Charlestown Road. And as you radiate out from some of those, then the density tends to drop off, with the majority of the county being really low density, which tells us that that's something more on the on-demand side. The higher density, that speaks really well to what TARC provides with a fixed route with a traditional 40-foot bus. And then as you move away from lower density, the 40-foot bus that's fixed route and pre-scheduled doesn't make a lot of sense, really. Next slide, please. So as you can look in other parts of the county, they have the challenges of lower density, but they still had fairly high concentrations of disadvantaged populations, senior folks, and folks with no access to a car. And that was especially prominent around Georgetown and Lafayette townships. Next slide. There's also quite a bit of employment clusters and sites that are emerging out of there. As you can tell, again, high density employment in New Albany, but other notable clusters around Highway 64 and I-64 in Georgetown and Duncan, and then along Highway 150 corridor, Floyd's Knobs, Galena, and Greenville. Next slide, please. So if you take all of those factors together, we look at a composite demand map. And again, New Albany has the highest potential demand because it has greater employment and population densities and a concentration of activity and other types of centers along the highway corridors. But there are other pockets of potential demand throughout the rest of the county, typically along those highway corridors that I mentioned. And you could see the ones that are in the darker shades there to the top left in that kind of color palette are the ones that we want. And then we also look at for the high ones as well, between the activity index and the needs index. Next slide. So all of this tells us that even though a large swath of Floyd County has lower densities, there's still a market for on-demand response model that's probably going to work in most places in the county. So this is not a 40-foot bus. This is more along the lines of a 12 to 8-person passenger van, or it could be what we call a cutaway, which is the vehicles that TARC uses now for the ADA service, or like what you would probably ride from the airport over to where you would get your rental car. So it's the Ford F-250 chassis with a type of bus box on the back. Next slide. So one of the options is to upgrade the existing Southern Indiana Transit Service provider to a demand response service and really have pre-booked microtransit countywide. The existing service provider needs a 24-hour booking window. So you call them up today and they will give you a 24-hour advance notice window of when you need to be at a certain destination. We think with a better onboard tool for the drivers, a better dispatching tool on the back end, and then a phone-based app and a way for folks who aren't as savvy with their cell phone, or they don't even have one at all, to still call a number. So with that type of a more robust dispatch software system that has real-time vehicle tracking and almost up to the minute trip booking, we could get the reservation window down to 2 hours. So it's a significant improvement. And as you can see here, that could be done with about the same number of vehicles, but it would significantly increase the ridership by about 3 times of doing that. It's a door-to-door model. The hours of operation, and this is just a straw man, but this is what we use for costs, would be 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. The fare would slide a little bit more on a scale depending upon how far you're actually being transported. And you could see there 0 to 10 is about $2, 11 to 20 would be $3, and more than 20 miles is a $4 trip. And that's pretty compatible with what the existing pricing scheme is now. Next slide, please, Greg. So that's the rural component. And as you can see there in the box, this is how the vehicles move over time throughout the day. And those blue dots are a pickup, and then the yellow dot is a drop off. Some of the rides would be shared. And you can see in the various scenarios, low, medium, or high, there's a range of the number of rides. And then the utilization basically is a measure of efficiency of how many people would be on board the vehicle at any given time. Peak hour is the number of vehicles that are used when the most folks would be riding. You can see an average trip duration that as more people use it, you're on the vehicle for a little bit more, and you're sharing the ride with a little bit more people as more people use it as well. Largely, it's a door-to-door service model. We would allow a little bit for a detour or a trip deviation to help you out to get you closer to your destination, so it would reduce your walk time. In the rural component, we also modeled a little bit of a Saturday service too in this one. So next slide, please. Another one that we looked at in terms of providing service would be to reestablish a little bit more of the TARC service, in the New Albany along Grant Line Road. TARC previously had a route, but due to COVID and other service parameters, it was cut. There is probably some good reason to reestablish the route back and to put that back. And actually, this, I believe, was one of the corridors, Aida, correct me if I'm wrong, that you all looked at in your micro mobility study, which I was a part of as well. So we're talking about something perhaps that's not quite the 40-foot bus, but could be smaller, ride share, scooter, maybe partnerships with the TNCs, the Transportation Network Company, but something to reestablish transit service in this corridor, perhaps in the future. It seemed to make sense when we were looking at it. Next slide, please. This discusses some of the parameters of that on-demand service, and you could see it ranges. So this is a different animal because it is in a more densely populated and has more concentrations of employment. So it's a different type of service model. We need to keep an eye on some of these parameters to see if they would change. Right now, this is a little bit more on the expensive side and isn't an immediate recommendation coming out of the study as to something that would be done, but it does warrant keeping an eye on to see if we could provide this in the future. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of basically what we're looking at. Opportunity one is again that countywide demand response service where we would lower the booking window down from 24 hours to 2. The rural component is that countywide lower density area. The urban component, it's slightly nuanced and maybe it's a little complicated, but for instance, the area of Georgetown at the moment is designated as urban. If you've ever been to Georgetown over in Floyd County, it has very few parameters that would strike anyone as being urban. And our understanding is that someone at NDOT and Federal Highway or Federal Transit Administration could redesignate those areas as rural, and then there wouldn't be 2 separate contracts. Right now, if you have a trip that goes from rural to rural, that's fine. Or you have a trip that goes from rural to urban, that is fine. But if you have an urban to urban trip, so you want to go, for instance, from Georgetown to New Albany, that is not allowed to be paid for with Section 5311 money. So that's being covered right now out of Floyd County's pocket and not with federal transit dollars that are in the more rural component. That's really just a separate discussion by all the powers that be to try to rectify that situation. But you can see the total cost per trip, as well as the one-time installation of the software within a range and the licensing fees. And then opportunity 2 is that New Albany on-demand micro transit component that I'm talking about as well. What we found to be the most beneficial for Floyd County was to go ahead and concentrate on opportunity 1 at the moment, but to monitor the parameters for opportunity 2. And if anything changed, or there was a different way of doing business, or the demographics changed, or the cost parameters changed, then that would rank higher on the list. But right now, what seems to be the most beneficial for the county would be to follow up with how to implement opportunity 1. Next slide, Greg. So how do you go about doing that? I presented a similar slide deck to Floyd County, to their county commissioners on the 6th of June. That would take briefing other partners, NDOT, Federal Transit Administration, and other people who are interested in that. The county would do that. The county would need to work out a memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement with SITS, who's the existing provider, to get them to understand. And they were part of our stakeholder advisory committee, so they are very much well aware of what the study recommended. But they would be the implementer of this more robust countywide system. They would have to come up with some contract mechanisms, basically to have this be performance-based with some parameters about the number of riders. So the more riders they get, the more money they would be paid. And that's actually how their existing contract works. They would be also held accountable for missed trips. If equipment break down, or maybe there were other snafus, on-time performance would also be a key. The software system would need to be procured. Because this sort of flies under the radar right now and is not widely known in the county and SITS want to be careful about publicity of the existing service as to not overwhelm their ability to deliver it. But a new marketing campaign to make folks aware now that this is a 2-hour potentially reservation window would need to be out there. So you would do a marketing campaign. And then as the service gets going, you would want to periodically evaluate it. Is the service doing what we set out? Is it meeting its goals? Are we serving the people that need it? Are the costs balanced with the service provided, etc.? Next slide. And I think this might be my last one. So this is all I have. I'd be happy, Andy, part of the committee, to entertain any questions that you guys got.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Is there any questions for Sean? Yeah, and
I would like to say, to ask how the operations will be funded. obviously you mentioned, Sean 5311 section and, parameters, how it relates. But otherwise, how would the service be funded? The operations?
I think 5311 could be the bulk of it. The county could put in some of their own general funds. They in fact do that now for the urban component. Going ahead, I think there's opportunities for other types of funding, maybe not necessarily in the operations realm, but to help buy the vehicles. And you all could be part of that discussion as well. But primarily it would be either state monies through NDOT, and they're very small, or they could be 5311 or county funds is really the three main sources at the moment.
Right, and is there a goal when to start service delivery, when to actually implement service time-wise?
No, I think the county wanted to mull over what the implications would be for SITs and have a conversation with them. I think the earliest that they could start realistically is you have to have the software system in place and tested. So that's going to take probably 3 to 6 months. The earliest I could see them really implementation, and this is just my own opinion, we're halfway through 2023. I don't see them up and running with this more robust system and probably until 2025.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Andy or Sean? Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it.
Guys,
Next on the agenda is the amendment number 3 to the Connecting Kentucky and the 2050 MTP and the 2023-2026 Transportation Improvement Program. Christopher,
hello, everyone. PowerPoint. So we are already at amendment 3 for both the Connecting Kentucky and 2050 MTP and the fiscal year 23 to 26. Okay, our schedule here for you all. You might remember the projects in Amendment 3, they're communicated to KIPTA by the May 3rd deadline a month ago. And on May 17th, we had an IAC meeting, and that led to splitting the 10 projects that we looked at. And 7, which were exempt, those were in Amendment 2, which was approved by TPC last month. And then we have the 3 non-exempt projects in this amendment, Amendment 3, which is a full amendment. And our public comment period, it went from May 23rd until June 23rd until July 8th. And we had an open meeting back on July 5th. The comments, if they weren't already, they're going to be sent to TPC by Greg today. And our TPC action is scheduled for July 27th, later this month. In brief, the 3 projects, 2 of them are from NDOT and 1 is from Louisville Metro. Our first NDOT one is the widening of I-65. What we did was, what they need to do is correct the status to non-exempt. It was previously listed as exempt, but it's a non-exempt project. And to update the project cost and TIP funding. Then there's also from NDOT, the I-64 added travel lanes project. For that one, they updated the description, updated the project cost and the TIP funding. Then our Louisville Metro project is the Reimagine 9th Street. And for that project, we're updating the project cost. They've added a bunch of new locally funded phases and the TIP funding. The full project listings are in the packet and also provided online. So this is an actionable item. I think it would be 2 actions. We're looking for approval to the MTP and then also approval to the TIP. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Chris? If not, we'll take this in two separate actions. I'll entertain a motion to approve or recommend approval of TPC of Amendment 3 of the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan.
So moved.
Got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Got a second, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.
Raise your hand. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. I've also entertained a motion then for recommended approval, TBC of Amendment 3 for the 2023-2026 Transportation Improvement Program. We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Got a second, is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Next item on the agenda is the shift working group. Andy?
Sir. Brief PowerPoint, some of which was from this spring, so I'll give you an update where we are with shift and then tell you where we're going with the shift process here. So back in the springtime, I believe in or about March and April, came to you all and we created a shift working group, if you will, to look at the sponsorship phase of the projects. Now we're quickly approaching the boosting phase of the project. So here, next slide, please. For those who don't know, I think we all know what it is. SHIFT stands for Strategic Highway Investment Formula for Tomorrow. This is the KYTC process that we do every other year that goes ultimately into constructing the next highway plan. Next slide, please. The data-driven process, those are the four facets of data that get included for this year's iteration of SHIFT. Next, please. Bike ped and a resilience factor have been added to the equation. And so now it's a 7-component data-driven process. Next slide. So this is from our previous iteration of this. Right now we're about halfway down. We're about halfway down that list. Okay, so really early in the year, the CHAP database, that's their largest database of projects at KYTC. Projects were entered or edited, costs were entered or edited in that database. Then the projects get sponsored not only by KIP to MPO, but also the other ads and other MPOs around the state, as well by the district offices, highway district offices from KYTC around the state. Those projects that get sponsored through that process, they get a score. Okay, and scoring is underway right now, and hopefully it's probably most of the way done, I think, or hopefully it'll be done very, very soon. Then there's some statewide priorities. By that means interstate projects, parkway projects, interchange projects. Those projects typically are not needing or eligible even to be boosted as we move on to the next phase. And here we are in the boost phase now, or rapidly approaching it. The boost is when we say as an MPO TPC or as the KIP to ADS Regional Transportation Council or the KYTC districts. Hey, we like that project so much. We favor that project so much. We want to give it a little boost to the score that came out of the black box scoring system that's underway right now. Then the district rankings get established and it turns into a highway plan. Next slide, please. So this one is a little bit different from before. Again, we've already had a one working group meeting back on April 17th, where we worked on getting our sponsorships right. Next step would be a working group meeting second working group meeting on August 9th, kind of bottom middle of that schedule there. Okay, so the projects are the KYTC schedule states that the projects are to be boosted by the ads, the MPOs, and the highway district offices during the time period between July 17th and September 15th. Okay, so and then that the scores those boosts need to be done again by September 15th. So from the KIPTA perspective, that's something we want to make sure we get done during August. Okay, and so hopefully we can get those to a TPC approval on August 24th. And to get there to August 24th, there's gonna need to be a working group, or somehow we're gonna figure out how to boost it. And what I'm proposing today, and would like to, for your all's consideration, is to create another working group, or it can be the same working group. And that group would meet on August 9th. The reason we say August 9th this far out in advance is because that's the scheduled date of our next TTCC meeting, okay? And so what we thought as staff might be a good idea, and it's up to the working group or the chair of this group to decide, is to, instead of having a typical TTCC meeting at this time in August, we will take the time that hopefully you all have on your schedule already to be a part of a KIPTA thing to host this working group meeting, okay, at that same time, okay? And so what does that mean? It might mean that our Indiana friends can take the month off, frankly, right? Because this is a Kentucky only thing, and the working group would be made up of Kentucky jurisdiction. So that's our thought, okay? Again, a little bit more on this. Later in the year, the scores get finalized. Hopefully we will have the scores. We do not have the scores yet. I was told by KYTC Central Office that this time frame should work. We'll have the scores soon. We hope to have them out soon. And so that should allow us to do some processing, lay the groundwork, so we'll have something prepared. It'll be close. It'll be late July most likely, but we'll have something prepared for this group, presumably on an August 9th meeting. Okay. At that point, you know, I mentioned it before, how the sponsorship phase, the analogy I've used, the sponsorship phase that we already went through, that's not a very deep cut. There's plenty of sponsorships to go around. We found that to be pretty much the case this go around too. But the boosting, which boosts we get, which happen, and I think they've cut our boost up only slightly to, I want to say it's around 18-19 projects, and for them to be able to get boosted, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll lay the groundwork for that. We'll get the information out to you guys as soon as we can. But our thought, and I don't think I have any slides. Do I have any slides? We can skip that. That's with that, I am requesting action to create this TPCC working group. And if it's the pleasure of this committee to go ahead and schedule that working group meeting at the typically scheduled TTCC time in next month in August. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Andy. We anticipate any other major agenda items for that TTCC regular meeting?
No, I don't think so. I think we had a guest speaker tentatively, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, okay, that's right. We moved into October. So yeah, there's nothing imminent that we have. Chris is going to speak about Amendment 4. I'm stealing our thunder right now. That it won't be in August. Okay. So no, it shouldn't be a major issue.
So primarily that meeting would be the working group then.
That's right. We do propose to have, for what it's worth, we no change to the TPC meeting that was in August. And so, you know, they need to approve these too. Of course they do. They would approve the working group's work for that matter. So if the typical or standard, well, it's on the calendar, I think it's August 24th, fourth Thursday. When that TPC approved this. This is all contingent on, you know, we gotta get the scores first, you know, and so if there's delay there, given that KYTC needs them back from the ads and MPOs by mid-September, I think that's right. I think it's on that schedule. It's incumbent on us to make sure we get that action, that PTC approval by August, late August.
Thank you, Andy. Is there any questions for Andy about this?
Actually, the motion be, I would suggest the shift working group that we had earlier would be.
You would have in conjunction with the TTCC meeting in August, yes.
But because Andy was saying we created this, I would just make the motion. The shift working group that we had before, continue with the boost.
At the next regular schedule in August. Okay.
I'll make that in the form of a motion if you need a motion.
Yes, we need a motion for that. Right. There is a motion for that. Is there a second?
Second?
We have a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing those, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Like sign. Motion carries. Always good to save a meeting. Next item on the agenda, number 8 is the KYTC funding discussion. Andy? Very good.
All right, where's the other? presentation. Okay, so earlier, I mentioned during the TPC report that we had a special meeting yesterday. And again, some of you all were here virtually at the meeting yesterday. And so a lot of this is going to be a repeat, but not all of it. There's one key difference. And I'm not going to go in as much depth as I went into yesterday, but what I want to do is inform the TTCC of what's going on with some of our dedicated funding. Next slide, please. So what started all this? What started this was a request last week from KYTC Program Management to request that we requested a cost increase to a project in Oldham County known as KIPTA ID 1877, State ID 5-542. This is the intersection improvement project at the intersection of Kentucky 329 and the 329 bypass. This is how the project is currently in our TIP. You can see at the bottom of the screen, it has $2 million construction phase, $2 million federal dollars in our STBG funding. The request, next slide, please. The request was for an additional $1.8 million, and they needed this money because, or they requested this money because of a late June letting, I think toward the end of last month, and all three bids that came in for construction phase was between, I want to say, in the $4 million range, while the construction estimate was in the low to mid $2 million range, as I recall. One of the things that KYTC did, thankfully, in this case, said are committed to providing the local match. That's not an inconsequential thing. That's 400 something thousand, if the math is correct, on that $1.8 million of additional federal money. All right. So so what we did is they were worried. They wanted that cost increase process basically that same day last week. And we said, well, we can't, TPC meets later in the month. How about a special meeting? And so yesterday we had that special meeting to do that. And the reason why they wanted to do it so quickly was because KYTC, it's their understanding that some significant amount of money is at risk. Okay. And the reason why the money is at risk is because there's this discrepancy out there between two of the federal government's federal transportation offices accounting systems. One is one that we deal with regularly, KYTC that deals with all the time as well, known as FEMIS, FMIS, and that's what FHWA uses, Fiscal Management Information System, I think that's what it stands for. But there's this other one that the U.S. Department of Transportation uses, and it's known as Delphi. And we don't know much about Delphi. We don't use Delphi. Delphi is not out of sight, out of mind to us, to be frank. But there's a $3.5 billion discrepancy between these databases. There was past tense, was a $3.5 billion discrepancy. Well, got a call this morning and talking to federal highway staff, and apparently there was a meeting yesterday with the finance folks from federal highways, and that word has gotten to the district or the division offices. Apparently that $3.5 billion discrepancy is no longer a $3.5 billion discrepancy. That's good. It's potentially been reduced to $1 billion. So somebody found $2.5 billion yesterday. That's a good day when you find $2.5 billion. So that's the late breaking news there in the red. So for those that were on this call yesterday or on the TPC meeting yesterday, the urgency that I mentioned is slightly less urgent. But all the same issues still probably do exist, okay? And a little bit more on that here on this slide is that what's most at risk, especially when it's a $3.5 billion discrepancy, are the dedicated federal funding programs that are suballocated to MPOs like us. Not just in Kentucky, but presumably nationwide, or surely nationwide. And even more so, what's at risk is the money that was in those programs through prior highway bills or infrastructure bills prior to the current one, the bipartisan infrastructure law, or the IIJA. And in the FEMIS system, there was, at least until yesterday, about $35 million effectively in our name in that system of this old money, the older versions of that money. So our STBG program had 35 million out there. The TAP program had 4.8 million, so nearly $40 million total. It's our understanding that with TPC approval yesterday, the administrative modification that kept the staff processed yesterday and sent this KYTC for their inclusion in the STIP, and ultimately the ability to obligate that money, they were going to do that virtually, ASAP, same day or today or very soon. What this does, and this is important, this reduces that balance. That the $3.8 million construction phase should reduce that $35 million pretty directly by that 3.8 million. Okay, so that puts less money at risk. That's important. Right? Okay, next slide, please. Talked a little bit yesterday about what the implications of this are, and some of these are softened a little bit. Some of these are softened a little bit because hey, somebody found $2.5 billion yesterday, or there's not as big a discrepancy yesterday as there was yesterday. But what's at risk is a rescission of that money, a rescission clawback of that money. We were told that it wasn't likely to be 100%. They weren't going to take it all back, but there was a good chance of some percentage of that. Perhaps now this percentage would be less, right? If the percentage was a little bit higher, if the discrepancy is less, the percentage is less. Let's hope for that. Well, again, this is a bit speculative on some of this stuff. So there could be a domino effect in our programs. Projects perhaps at a minimum are going to have to move out. We're funded through fiscal 27. Well, it might move projects out to 28, 29. Who knows? If some amount of money is taken. Okay, that would have to happen, or projects would effectively have to be canceled, removed from the program. We've got to balance our budget. In other words. Well, which projects might be impacted? I put up I made the reference yesterday to we might have some bad debt, we might have some good debt. Well, that's kind of true, but it's not all the way true. It's not a perfect analogy. So, well, which project would be at risk? The projects that created this problem, it's fair to say, that's the projects that have sat in that program and haven't been implemented yet. That's fair to say that. I believe that anyway. There's lots of reasons they're still in the program. They're not bad projects. They're good projects. They're all good projects. But nonetheless, they're still there. They've been there for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years even. Well, that's where the old money, we had that old money issue, and that's the old money there. Would those projects be impacted? Well, maybe, but we wouldn't want to do that probably because there's been significant federal expenditures paid toward those projects, and that has serious consequences. Okay, well, if not those, it's the newer projects. The newer projects got the newer money. The newer money is not the money that's at risk. The old money in the federal accounting systems is what is potentially at risk, not the new money. Well, it's not fair to those projects. Not fair to those projects to be removed or kicked down, moved out, whatever the case might be. So what I'm getting at is that there's probably some tough. We're going to have to come up with some tough solutions. It's going to be tough to pick. Either winners or losers, how you want to look at it. Which projects get impacted the most is what I want to put in the minds of this committee. All right, that's something. That's big. It's not as big as it was yesterday, but still large. But this bottom line here, the project that needed $2 million extra in Oldham County looks a lot like a lot of the other projects, doesn't it? It's an intersection improving project, $2 to $5 million project. We have lots of those projects. Well, the cost increase was fine, or the cost that was the cost estimate, it was done probably not too many months or years ago. Well, but it's out of date the way we've got inflation going on right now. And so that whatever it was, $2-point-something million construction phase became $4 million. Well, isn't that the likely future for most of the projects in the program? Especially projects that have been sitting in the program for a long time? I think it probably is. And so later this year, at our next progress update meeting, we expect, I think it's fair for us to expect, a large number of project costs or large cost increases as cost estimates perhaps get updated or projects move further along their life cycle. And we expect those to be numerous. Every single project, bids are coming in that high. It's not sidewalk projects. It's not roadway projects. It's not transit projects. It's all the projects. It's all the projects that cost a heck of a lot more to build today than cost a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And again, some of these projects entered into these programs up to like 15 or 18 years ago. So some of them have been in there. I'm not saying the cost estimates are from 15 or 18 years ago, but they've been in there for that long. So we've got those top three lines, which ones are impacted, but then we've got this whole thing that we probably won't be able to afford the projects we have right now in the years that we say we have them, because the cost increases will need to be, are either they're necessary to keep these projects going. Next slide, please. So this is a bit of a recap from what we have, or just a showcase of what we have programmed currently. Okay. All right. So you can see these sponsors. These are the folks that have a project program in either the STBG program or our Transportation Alternatives program. Okay. You can see the number of projects there that they have in one of those funding programs. And you can see on the right how much money these agencies have programmed in our programs. GIFTAS program, I should say, perhaps. And that's looking forward. That's not looking back. That's not dollars that those projects have already had or spent. That's a different answer to a different question. But this is how much money the program has on the hook, these projects have on the hook in these programs going forward. Okay. Huge dollar amounts. I think the sum of that is $220 million. $220 million over through fiscal year 2027. All right, it's like, all right, this is important too. It's a little bit different, but it's probably about as important as anything. We used to, and we still do. This is something we want to put in front of the TTCC and the TPC as often as we can, because we've got to collectively fix the problem. Some of the stuff that happened in the past, while it matters, and we know why it happened in some level, we know which projects that have happened and which ones haven't. But it's up to this committee, the TPC, the staff, outside agencies to fix the problem. We got to do better. We just have to do better. Point blank. Okay. So what do I have here? I mentioned the old money. Okay, the old money, the pre-bill money, pre-BIL, pre-bipartisan infrastructure law. That's that top line. And these numbers are current as of last week. They're in the FEMAS, remember that's the FHWA accounting system. That top left, we had $37 million available in those old codes, the old codes in FEMAS. Okay, the pre-BIL money. All right, amongst all those codes, and there are numerous number of codes, 10, 12, some number. We've obligated a negative amount of money this year. Again, I don't want to dwell on that. That's probably some money being shifted around, or not as much money was needed, but there's negative balance. So let's not focus on that. Okay, but let's just assume that's a zero. We've not obligated any of those dollars this year as a group, as a region. Okay, so our unobligated balance actually has inched up by a fraction of a percent. All right, last month there's the issue with the CRISA money. That's the coronavirus stimulus money. Well, that money was at risk with the debt ceiling negotiations and the debt ceiling bill out of Congress. And in this region, we had $6.5 million of those CRISA dollars that until last month, those were scheduled to expire, not last month, but September 30th of 2024. Okay, that money was safe and sound until it wasn't. Last month, it was with the debt ceiling bill, any unobligated CRISA money was gone. Okay, so thankfully, KYTC came and said, hey, we don't want any of that money being lost by the state. So KYTC said, we'll take that money and we'll put it toward a project. And thankfully, they put it toward a project in our region, the iMove project, the G. Snyder 7164 project. Okay, and so that money got obligated basically that same day or that same week to keep it from at risk of being lost. That's good. They replaced the money, by the way, too, so that's important. And then we have the new money. That's the BIL, the row there. So that's the money that's not at risk. There's not a substantial risk, at least, and shouldn't be at risk. We had $45 million to start the year. We've only obligated $4.8 million, 10.6% of it. And so our unobligated balance still remains $40.8 million. You put all three of those together, we started with $89 million. We've obligated 11 or 12.6%, and the unobligated balance is $78 million. We've only obligated 12.6% of the money that was available at the beginning of the year through 3/4 of the year that we were in. Okay. Well, you see a little hashtag #, whatever it's called these days, next to that 12.6%, and you can see some fine print down there on the bottom. Well, some of that money was obligated for us. KYTC obligated the 6.4 million instantly after last month's events. And so the reality, the harsh reality of it is that 12.6 is not as accurate as perhaps we want it to be, because it's really just 5.8% of the projects that were kind of in our program have been obligated. 3/4 of the year, 3/4 of the way through the year, and here we are on arguably 5.8% of our obligation. All that's going to do, that's boosting our carryover balance. That's putting more money at risk. If it's not this crisis, it's the next one. And so this is where we are right now. Some of this is harsh reality. Some of it is something, there's lots of reasons for this. There's sure to be some debate and some conversation at this table, at a working group table, at the PPC table in the coming weeks and months. There will be. One thing we're targeting is that working group or progress report group meets every 6 months. That's in early September or in September. So there will be a lot of discussion about this then. That's when we expect to get those phase shifts, cost increases. And hopefully there's some good news about money being obligated. Again, the crisis is not as bad as it was yesterday. It has subsided, if only slightly, but this is still important information that I hope at a minimum, we want to get in front of you all more often. This type of information, here's our report card. We need that bottom line, that bottom percent obligated. Be awesome if that's much closer to 100% on a year in and year out basis. We get, by the way, we're getting about $30 million a year in these programs. So 30 million is kind of the target, has traditionally been our target. In essence, has been our target. If we don't obligate 30 million a year, to use the sinking ship analogy, we're taking on more water. If we can obligate 31 million, we've bailed out $1 million from our deficit. If we obligate 29 million, we take another $1 million on and we're taking on more water. Okay, so 30 million is more or less the target. And here we are at 11, or arguably 11 minus 6 million, you know, because KYC obligated that money. They swooped in and took some of that money. And again, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We don't have all of the answers. I think this is a conversation we need to keep going. It's a conversation that you all have told us. We all want our help. We don't have all the answers at KIPTA. We wish we did. We wish there was a magic pill we could take and fix this problem. There's not one. It's something that we are committed, though, to working with everybody in this room to fixing to the best of our abilities. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions. There is no action there.
Question, Andy.
Yes, sir.
Is this a recent problem, or is something that's been happening for years over and over?
It is not a recent problem. I think it'd be wrong to say it's a recent problem. I think the carryover balance, which is based in essence what I just showed, same problem, please. As I recall, I think it jumped a lot during the COVID pandemic, fiscal 2020 and 2021, perhaps. There for a few years prior to that, we were doing okay, as I recall. Projects were getting out the door closer to on schedule. But you know, there's still 3 months left in this year, so the story's not written on 23 yet. Okay, are we going to obligate 70 million in the next 3 months? No. Can we get to 30 million in the next 3 months? That'd be awesome. Don't know the answer to that question. But to say it's a recent problem, no, it's not a recent problem. This carryover balance has been slowly but surely growing over the years. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah. One of the things we compared and didn't show it on this presentation, but we have the numbers, and perhaps it's something we'll share in September or sooner if we need to. Is these old projects and how many projects have been sitting in the system for so long? Okay. That number, that total dollar amount of projects in the program was like 220 million or something like that. We took a look at what projects, we drew the line, arbitrary as it is, which projects got their first construction phase, not right away, not design, not utilities, but construction phase in the KIPTA tip in these programs. Okay. What year did those projects get the first construction funding awarded? Okay. Then we said, how many of those projects got that first construction prior to 2020, to the recency question. And as I recall, the numbers are, it's about half of those dollars. Half of the dollars, that $220 million, are for projects that had construction, that were awarded construction through these programs by the TPC many years ago now. So long ago that they, at one point in time, it was thought that the construction phase for those projects was going to be in 2019 or prior. Last I checked, we're in 2023, so we're 4+ years beyond that. Okay, some of the projects have been in the pipeline, frankly, candidly, for 10 to 15 years. 10 to 15 years. Projects take time. They take time. Okay, so that's not a direct indictment on any given project, but we've got so many projects that have been sitting out there for too long. Okay, and again, we don't have answers. Staff doesn't have the answers to fix the problem. There is no magic pill, but there is. There something's got to give, something's got to change, and we know it, and because whether we like it or not, the crisis that may be averted by 3.5 million going down to 1 billion, 3.5 billion to 1 billion, we don't know what that next crisis is going to be when somebody, federal government perhaps, says, no, we can't do that anymore. We don't, again, I hate playing what if games, but I'm playing it right now. What if KYTC implements rules that are more aligned with INDOT's rules? Yeah, we can't carry over 10 million, 70 million, 100 million, whatever our carryover balance is going to be this year. We can carry over precisely $0 in Indiana. That's why we had to make the moves we made last month. Okay, so it's a different rule book in Kentucky. Okay, perhaps extremes, right? $0 can be carried over north of the river. It's allowable in the, south of the river. So. And perhaps we're seeing what happens with the different rules. But we all know this. I hope, or I think if you don't know this, I'm glad that we're sharing it here today. But again, the problem is not necessarily a recent one, but it's a real one.
And if I can, to me, what we have to address and really look at is when you talk about these old programs that have been sitting and they've had money, or money is there. I think it's safe to say everybody in this room wants every project that we get, that we put in, that we advocate for, we want them done yesterday.
Sure.
So how do we address these that are obligated, if they're there? Where's the, I don't even know where the fix is. So how do we, I think we've got to address that, because it's not from lack of anybody in here, oh, well, we got it, so let's just wait for 10 years to do a project. I think Tom probably knows this better than anybody else. Everybody in here that calls you guys about a road, literally we want it done yesterday. It's not that. So how do we address that? That to me, and the other side is, what does it mean to be obligated? Because the federal government changed those rules recently on what we had obligated through ARPA, how they look at what's obligated now and what they said originally. They
So keep in mind when TPC awards STBG, or in yesteryear years called SLO dollars, that money is not obligated. That is programmed or allocated or whatever you want, whatever word you want to use. So that's at the local level. Okay. The obligation occurs when KYTC requests it with Federal Highways Administration.
Right.
Okay, to say.
So I think to me, that's a starting point. But again, how do we address? Like I said, I'm at a loss on where we even go with this, and I think I'm probably not wrong in that.
Well, there's lots of options. Changing our, we've got this thing called our project management guidebook. Okay, that's the rules of the game, and we've edited that three years ago, whenever it was. Our first version of that was several years prior to that. We have to police ourselves through that. I think that's a big part of the solution. Whether it's part of the problem, I don't know, but it's part of the solution. What ramifications do we want as a group? I've given it the sports analogy. You hear about the NCAA getting schools in trouble. Well, the NCAA is the schools. Okay, well, isn't this kind of the same thing? We got to look at ourselves. We are the TPC, and then as representatives of agencies that are on the TPC, we've got to police ourselves. It's up to us. It's up to us to do that. And there's going to be some tough decisions that have to be made, tough rules that we might have to make. I don't want to penalize any community in this region, and nobody else does either, to my knowledge. And so I hope we don't get that. I don't hope we don't get to where it's truly a penalty. But there has to be some level of repercussions, otherwise it's going to continue to get worse. I think, unless we just each say, hey, I've got to do better. And I'm going to do
The
this.
difference in that analogy is I don't think anybody in here set out to get a project in and then just forget about it when it's sit on the table for 10 years. That's not, you know, when you use your NCAA, most of the time, those guys know they're doing something wrong. I don't think anybody's done anything wrong here. Didn't set out to do anything wrong.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so either.
I mean, I guarantee everybody in here that put a project in did not decide to just let it sit forever.
I believe that there's some agencies have chased other newer dollars while projects in our program have not been at their top of their priority.
Andy, is the discussion going to be continued at the working group meeting that we just scheduled for the 8th, or is the working group going to focus on this at all?
So that working group should strictly keep their focus on the shift process.
Right.
Okay, keep in mind, this came up yesterday as well. The shift process or the shift projects turn into highway plan projects, Kentucky Highway Plan project.
Right.
This is not, you know, these projects are in there by reference, I believe, but it's not, that's not necessarily the same. It's the different pots of money that needs.
But I mean, we keep, agree with you, we need to find solution. Either we need, and this is just me talking from perspectives of our infrastructure system, sidewalks and everything else needing so much improvement, and we are sitting on the money that we are not spending. So that's a big responsibility. And I don't think anyone feels good about that. I mean, we could take this money and would be dropped in a bucket.
Yeah.
Considering the road and other multimodal needs in the region. Either we need, me speaking, for myself, we need to talk specifically about every single project that is holding us up. If it's sitting there for 10 years, why? Can we move forward? If we invested already, should we cut the losses? And change our rules, because we established project management process to push the projects forward, and we did. So we basically need to figure out, is our book good? Is our system broken? What can we do? Or what's here? Because this, I mean, this is it recent problem? It's chronic problem. It's chronic illness. And we need to figure it out. And let's talk about every single project on the list and face to face like technical people. What do we do here to fix it?
So we do have what we have coming up is one of the things I mentioned earlier in early mid-September.
Yeah.
Sometime in that time frame. That's the time that we do that. And then this is gonna be a tough meeting
I mean,
for
we
all
need
those
to
reasons.
face it. If we don't face the problem, we will never be able to solve it.
If the staff are up to the challenge.
And us too, all of us.
It needs to be. Yes, and we all need to look at ourselves. On
Yeah.
some
Let's
level.
be grown-ups.
Yeah.
And figure out what's working, what not, why not. Cut the losses, keep moving.
Here.
Any other questions for Andy?
I had a question about that CRISA money that you mentioned, what got swapped out. And, but you didn't really go into detail about that. First, there are some of us who, request funds, and to authorize funds for these projects. And it's really helpful for us to have some sort of documentation that goes with our funding requests that say, you know, this CRISA money was swapped out for such and such of X dollars, and that needs to be part of the authorization process. So I guess what I'm asking is if there's anything in writing you have, it would be really great to know more about that, and if we could have a copy of that.
Okay. We still do not have, yes, we have the commitment that it'll be replaced. Okay, we have that in writing. What we don't have is the exact type of dollars that are going to replace the CRISA dollars in our tip, which helps you with that, right? We've been told to assume that those are, I guess, the STDG state version of that. Is what we were told we could comfortably assume that it would probably be those. Those would come with local match requirements. That was the kicker on when KYTC took the 6 point whatever million, it was 100% federal. Well, now it's very unlikely to be 100% federal. It's likely to be 20 federal, which is better than zero. To be clear, because it's about to be zero, 0-0. Yes, we were working with program management to get the name of the dollars.
Yeah, a couple years from now, maybe not all these people are here, maybe the same people aren't in program management, but if there's some sort of commitment in writing that we can share with our program management office that says, hey, there was a commitment made here, and these people, we need to try to honor that. That's really helpful. There's some examples of that in the past. For example, when we did our projects a number of years ago, there were a lot of projects that didn't meet the criteria to move quickly to get funding. And so we offered those projects, instead of our funding, we said, why don't you use SLO dollars and with toll credit match, so basically a free project. And that was all in writing. And as we worked through those project authorizations, we would send a copy of that along to our program management office and say, hey, don't forget we had an agreement. So that's really important for down the road.
We'll work on squaring that up because yesterday, immediately as byproduct of the TPC special meeting, we processed administrative modification number 2, and we had hoped to include, we had planned on getting that formalized and then add in my 2, and this came up. Yes, it'll have, we'll get the dollars in the right name, or we'll get we'll be adding.
There's actually projects now that that are positioned to ask for a CRISA authorization right now. And so sooner the better. We're getting to that end of the year where at some point in the next month or two, people are going to start saying, we got to authorize these dollars immediately.
Right.
And so it'd be really helpful.
Also, some of the other information that it sounds like it's going to be coming out today or this week is maybe putting it in writing, the whatever happened yesterday. Why did it go from 3.5 billion to 1 billion? Apparently that's coming out in writing soon too. So I think I'd be to share that, to TPC or to this group, if requested or yeah. Good day to find 2.5 billion. We can all find 2.5 billion someday. Nice.
Thank you, Andy. Next item on the agenda is the Safe Street and roads for all cricket. Andy?
Sure. Don't have a presentation on this one. Just to give a brief update to the committee on where we are with that. Those responses, I think, as everybody knows, were due to us at the end of June, by late June. We got 4 responses. We got responses from 4 firms or from 4 proposals, and all 4 of which, as I recall, were all partnerships, multiple firms in one proposal. The projects, the scoring, the project selection committee, I should say. We are finishing up our work. The deadline for that is today. I think we have 1 outstanding committee member who has not sent his or her scores to us yet. But the deadline is today, so hopefully we'll have those scores from that individual today. We hope to get a firm under contract before too long. We're hopeful, might be slightly wishful thinking, but hopefully we can get a notice to proceed perhaps maybe by the end of August, let's say. So we certainly don't have any awards to announce this time. But again, we got 4 firms. Those projects are being scored, and 4 good proposals by 4 good firms or 4 partnerships. So I think your all's communities are gonna be happy with the work of probably any of those. So again, one thing to note is I want to say thank you to those agencies that have provided the local match money. We've gotten most of those payments so far, not most in dollar amounts, but most in terms of the agencies that have paid the bill, so to speak. So thank you so much for that. If you haven't, or if you don't know if your agency has or not, please do reach out to me and we'll figure out what we need to do and square that up. That's all I have. No actions required.
Thank you. Any other questions on that, Grant? Next item number 10, amendment number 4. Chris?
Try to keep this pretty short. Yeah. So Andy mentioned earlier, we're in the early stages of preparing for what will become Amendment 4. I've got a tentative schedule that we put together to share with you all. Alright, so here's our schedule right now. Like I said, it's tentative. We're gonna put out an email probably by the end of this week, and that'll be a prompt for any project changes, new or modified project changes. And our deadline right now would be August 24th for that. We're not necessarily looking for new projects. It's just if you have something that is going to be needing an amendment level change, try to keep that deadline in mind. Changes can be submitted at any time though. And this is basically a courtesy to this KIPTA and also all of our sponsors with planning for the amendment timeline, since the amendments take a little bit more time than the admin mods. So again, this is a tentative schedule, and it could at this time accommodate both exempt and non-exempt project changes, because we're making it so that it could be a full amendment if needed, depending on the types of projects, the types of changes needed. The air quality activities are going to take some time, and the public comment period will follow the IAC meeting. KIPTA plans to seek TTCC and TPC approval in October for this amendment. And we've already got a small list of projects that are going to need changes, and we have those planned for this amendment. If that's you and you want to check with me, feel free to email me about that, and I can verify that I've got you on my list already. At this time, those are all exempt changes. And one last thing, currently, we're still using our full KIPTA project application in our planning portal. I've gotten some feedback over the last few months about that, and I want to let you all know that Brady's leading the charge in designing some new applications. One's going to be for existing project changes, so it'll be a little bit more of a shorter application, which I think will make all of us happy. And the other one will be for new projects. We'll have more on this in the future. It's possible that we can have this up before August 24th, but we're not quite ready yet. We're still developing that. That's all I've got on that. If anyone has any questions.
Just make a comment.
Sure.
As a heavy user of your application tools, I would like an opportunity to comment on whatever your draft tool is, because you know we use that tool hundreds of times a year, and we just got 2 people, and to make it an efficient process would be a blessing.
100% our intention is to streamline.
Yeah, any feedback you have, feel free to let me or Brady or any of us know, for sure.
Yeah, we just like to, you know, see what it's going to be before it becomes efficient.
Okay.
Sure. Put it for test drive, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
We know how to ride. We can provide good feedback.
Great.
There's no new projects, you said? No new projects?
Well, I guess the reason why I said that was just to point out, we're not like, come up with some new ideas, everyone, but you can submit whatever you need at any time. And,
It's definitely not a call for project. How about that?
I know it's not cold.
Given what I just said, we're booked up and we.
Might do something about it.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Maybe anybody to move.
thank you all, that's all I got.
Thank you, Chris. Next item on the agenda is other business. Is there any other,
I don't have any this month, but, you know,
is there any new staff or?
let's see, we do. I introduced Kyle. Thank you. Matt. Kyle was not, he was at TPC. So Kyle Thorne is the newest transportation planner. I can get the staff. Kyle just recently graduated from UK. And so one of the things that, Kyle will be working on many things. He'll be working with Spencer a lot on long range planning type activities, but probably more acutely what you'll get to know, and hear from Kyle about soon will be, you know, at all levels of government are confronting this. Local government is, state government certainly is, transit agencies are too. Chasing that federal discretionary dollar, staying abreast of the federal discretionary dollar. I've asked Kyle to be our leader on that, so I envision a lot of new information to this committee, to TPC, so to keep you all abreast on what federal discretionary dollars are out there to make your all's lives a little bit easier. So that is something that Kyle will be focused on. So you'll be hearing a lot from Kyle on that front too. Kyle, you want to say anything? It's good.
Next item on the agenda is a favorite one to adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn? There's a motion. Is there a second? I'll make a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you.